When I first started working out, I had noodle arms. And since I was skinny fat, every single time that I would lift my arm up, you'd be able to see the skin dangle down from my tricep as if I was an old lady. And I remember being so embarrassed about this that I would literally wear a hoodie no matter what. No matter how hot it was, no matter what I was doing, I always made sure to have something on that was gonna cover up my arm. When I first joined the gym when I was 18, I remember one of the first goals I had set for myself was to be able to fill out sleeves. And I will say, I did get there pretty quickly. However, not in the way that you would expect. Not because I was gaining a bunch of muscle. It was because I did a dirty bulk and put on a lot of fat. And I mean a lot. I went from 130 pounds being skinny fat to 200 pounds feeling like a bloated mess all the time. And I will say my arms definitely did get bigger. I was filling out t-shirts, however, not really in the way I wanted to. However, back then I really didn't care that much because all I cared about was not feeling like I was swimming in every single t-shirt that I would wear. And I remember being so excited when I was first able to start filling out t-shirts that the only shirts I would end up buying are those fitted Nike dry fit t-shirts. They weren't compression shirts or anything like that. I just remember them feeling pretty tight around my arms and it made me feel way more jacked than I really was. But as time went on and as I get older, obviously I don't want to keep buying those same Nike dry fit t-shirts. So I knew it was time for me to actually start locking in and building actual muscle on my arms. But this time around, I didn't want to feel like a bloated, bulky mess in order to be able to fill out t-shirts. So my next big goal I set for myself was to be able to have a good lean physique with abs and still be able to fill out t-shirts. Now that's the hard part because anyone can get big and be able to fill out shirts. However, being able to do that with a good body composition is where a lot of people fail. So here's what my arms look like now, and you can definitely notice some pretty significant improvements over the last 8.5 years. I've never really been big on actually measuring my arms because I've always been focused on how they actually look and what they feel like. But if I had to guess, my arms are probably around 13 to 14 inches back then flexed, if I could even flex them back then. Now, like I said, I don't really measure my arms, but if I had to guess, they're probably around 17 and a half, 18 inches roughly. But what I do know and what I care about more than just actual measurement is that the fact that I'm able to fill out my t-shirts and have a good body composition to go with it. But look, man, here's the truth. Before I get into all the exercises, the frequency, the volume, and all the workout specifics on how to actually build up your arms, you need to keep in mind that much more goes into growing your arms and just building muscle in general than just the workouts themselves. The nutrition, recovery, and most importantly, the consistency. And I don't mean just going to the gym to check a box. I mean going to the gym with the intent of progressing, breaking down, and building up muscle. Because you have to keep in mind, like honestly, man, what you do outside of the gym is probably even more important than what you do in there. You could implement everything that I go over in this video for the workouts to a T and still not make any progress if the other aspects are not dialed in as well. If you're not eating enough food, if you're not eating enough of the right food, you're not recovering properly, getting your sleep, staying hydrated, and doing that for years and years, you're not gonna see any results no matter how good your training actually is. At the end of the day, it's really about doing the boring, ordinary things for an extraordinary period of time in order to see extraordinary results. There aren't any hacks, quick fixes, magic pills, regardless of what you guys want to believe. So now that that's out of the way, without further ado, let's get into the actual workouts and the training side of things. So before I get into the actual exercises themselves, you first need to realize how often I was training my arms. So for the first 5 to 6 years of me working out, the split I followed was a push-pull legs, meaning that I would train my arms twice per week. And during this time, I definitely saw a good amount of arm growth. However, over time, this growth started to slow down because the issue with push-pull legs, if your emphasis is to focus on arm growth, is that a majority of the time is that you're training your arms at the end of your workouts, meaning that you already exhausted a lot of your energy and resources to the other bigger muscle groups, which for overall physique development is a good idea. However, if your main goal is to build up your arms, you want to utilize as much energy and resources during your workouts to actually arm training. So after the 5 to 6 years of me doing push-pull legs, when my arm progress started to slow down quite a bit, during my 7th year of training, I switched my split up to doing chest and shoulders, back and traps, arms, legs, and rest. Now, I really enjoyed this split a lot because having an actual arm day made it so I could progress significantly faster on a lot of my lifts. However, the main issue that I was having with this split is that I was only training my arms about 1.5 times per week. And ideally, you want to be able to train them twice per week. Now, the split that I started following recently to start seeing even more arm growth is chest and back, arms and shoulders, legs, rest. With the split I'm following now, I'm able to hit my arms twice per week and also have a workout where I start with arm exercises. And by doing this, I found that it's much easier to progressive overload my arms when I'm training them at the start of my workouts. Now, you could even backtrack and say you could do this with push-pull legs and just put your arms first. However, I do still want to focus on overall physique development. Yes, having big arms is nice. However, I don't want to let any of my other bigger muscle groups start to see diminishing returns because I'm putting more emphasis on my arms. So now that you have the split in frequency, let's get into the actual exercise selection and the order that they're in. So when people think of big arms, most of the time they're going to think of big bicep, Arnold in particular. However, what you need to keep in mind is that your triceps are 2/3 of your arms. So if you want bigger arms, focusing on your triceps is gonna do much more for you than focusing on your bicep. So with that in mind, let's start with tricep. The main tricep exercise that I've been really enjoying recently is the JM press. Why, you might ask, is because it's an exercise that you can really load up a lot of weight on your triceps and progressive overload relatively quickly. The main compound exercise I was doing for my triceps prior was dips or weighted dips. However, I switched over to the JM press recently because when I was doing dips, I noticed a lot of activation in my chest and shoulders, which was not the priority I was after. Not only that, but I also just feel my triceps activate way more when I actually do the JM press. So if you don't know what the JM press is, very similar to a close grip bench. However, the main difference is kind of the placement in which the bar comes down and where your arms are. You want to make sure your elbows are as close to your body as possible and that the bar is coming down to your chin and mouth area. And really just focus on using your triceps as opposed to any other muscle. I do 2 sets of 8 to 12 reps going to complete failure. And my goal for every single workout is to either increase the weight or increase the reps of every single set. Now, the next exercise I do for my triceps is going to be any sort of push down variation. The attachment I've really been enjoying recently is just the V bar. But honestly, if you like the straight bar, if you like the easy bar, those will get the job done as well. With these, you want to make sure that you're keeping your elbows in a fixed position and almost think of your arms like a door hinge. I use the same intensity progressive overload principles as I did with the JM press. So 2 sets, 8 to 12 reps going to complete failure. And every single workout has the intent of increasing the weight or the reps of each working set. Sometimes what I'll do even is just throw in a couple cheat reps at the end of my set just to drive the intensity a little bit higher. And that's pretty much all I do for triceps really, because when you apply the right intensity, you don't really need to do a whole lot of volume. If you're actually able to really push yourself with every single working set and give it your absolute all, you will realize that you really don't need to do a lot of volume. So now moving on to bicep. For the last year or so, my go-to bicep exercise has been preacher curls or incline dumbbell curls. I really like these a lot because you're able to train the bicep in the length and position. If I had to pick one out of those two, I would say the preacher curl is my favorite and my go-to, and it's definitely one that I do more consistently. What I like about the preacher curls a lot is that you can load up a decent amount of weight and get a really good squeeze at the top. When the intensity is in place, when you have good form on preacher curls, the pump is honestly like nothing else. As far as the intensity and progressive overload, to no one's surprise, it's the exact same thing I did for my triceps. 2 sets, 8 to 12 reps, going to complete failure with the intent of every time I do those 2 sets to increase the weight or increase the reps. Now, the next exercise I like to do for biceps is going to be something that's going to put a little more emphasis on your long head and the brachialis. Now, I know you can't specifically target those parts of your bicep. However, when you have your hands in a neutral grip, it might place a slightly higher emphasis. My favorite exercise to do so is cable curls with the rope attachment. You could also get away with doing hammer curls. However, I just feel my biceps activate a lot more when I'm doing cable curls with the rope attachment. And also just keeps the tension a little bit more constant because there's a cable and your arms aren't dangling down with no tension at the bottom. So having that neutral grip and placing a slight emphasis on your brachialis and long head is going to help build the thickness of your arm when someone's looking at you from the front. And as per usual, like all the exercises, the intensity approach I used was 2 sets, 8 to 12 reps going to complete failure, making sure to increase either the weight or the reps of both of those working sets. I'm sure you're seeing a common theme here. And another thing with bicep curls, kind of what I touched on with the tricep pushdowns, is that don't be afraid to do some extra cheat reps at the end. It's very unlikely you're going to injure yourself. You're probably not going to build up much fatigue, and it's just going to drive the intensity up that much more. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's pretty simple. There's no really need to overcomplicate the exercises or intensity because at the end of the day, the basics are what work. You just have to be consistent with them and also make sure that you have every aspect outside of the gym dialed in as well. So that's what I did to be able to build up my arms to where they are now. So I'm able to fill out sleeves and still have a lean physique to go with it. And I'm definitely going to keep continuing to do these exercises for the foreseeable future because the results with them recently have been phenomenal. So I definitely recommend you guys give these exercises a go with those intensity techniques that I mentioned earlier and see how you like it. But yeah, I hope you guys found this video valuable, and I'll see you in the next one.